as you heard in the intro, this is the project file we're working with. To start off with, we got 120 BPM, which is pretty relevant here because I noticed a lot in Juice tracks. It's sort of doing like typical house and techno kind of things, but it's a little bit slower and a little bit groovier. And sometimes they even tend to go like a little bit lower, like 110 or 115 or something. But I thought 120 worked for this track. But yeah, by going slower than say like 125 or 128, which would be more standard for house or techno, you can sort of get more of a organic groove and feel. And I've touched on this before in other videos. So to start off with, we have this pad, I guess, that I made in analog, which sounds like this. The side chain doesn't trigger unless I have the kick soloed as well. So that's pretty straightforward. Essentially what I did was I programmed in these notes on the upbeat of the 2, so it's like doom 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 doom. You get the gist of it. And what that does is it's working with the groove, while it's also, doing melodic stuff, of course. But yeah, it's like working with the groove, and some of the other elements in here play that same way. And they all work together to make this track. And that's something that's pretty important that I want you to take away from this, is that it's very important to know melodics, but also the groove really needs to be there. And yeah, so that's what I was aiming for. So essentially all I have is, this is in G minor. It's I can show you the chords. I don't actually have the middle notes for any of these, but it's G minor, D sharp major, and then C minor. And then I just have the 1st and the 5th in there. And what I did was I pitched the 5th up an octave. So you really get that like full sound of both this low note and this little higher up note that sound pretty good. As far as the synth patch, let me turn off all the processing and I'll show you what I did. It's pretty simple. Basically all I did was it's analog, and I just turned off the second oscillator. I kept it on the default saw wave. I guess I pitched this up an octave. I added the noise in there, but it's very quiet, and I turned the color up all the way. I set the amp envelope just how it comes by default, and then I messed with the filter a lot. I set the envelope to this, and the attack and sustain and decay like this. So it's like it goes like into the sound. Like if I just had no attack, it's like a pluck, but this way it goes into the sound, and that's what I wanted. Only other thing that I did was I used the vibrato, just a very little bit of it, just to give it sort of like a more vintage kind of like analog feel, because a lot of times like old synths are sort of like warbling in and out of tune, I guess, just so slightly, or ever so slightly. So I used the vibrato to do that, and I noticed a lot in Juice music he uses like those kind of more like old sounds that are very very warm and organic like that, like I said. So after that I put this phaser on, but it's not really doing much. I'm kind of just using it as a filter actually, because if you hear without it, I'll skip to this, and then with it, it's sort of like doing certain things that I kind of liked. So you see I don't have the LFO on or the envelope or anything. I just messed with the feedback and the frequency. So that's just in there, and it's kind of subtle, but it makes it sound a little bit more analog to me as well. Now the reverb's pretty important here. All I really touched though was the dry wet and the decay time. And that's just what gives it that big warm or big feel, like it's very spacey and spaced out and stuff. After that I put on a saturator with a bit warmer preset, of course, and that's just sort of like driving everything a little bit more and making it a little bit fatter and, as you can imagine, a bit warmer. So after that all I have is the side chain, and then I cut out some of the low end with a EQ. So I just side chained everything in this track. It just made sense. After that we have the bass, and the bass is 2 layers. The bass is this one and this sub. So the reason why I split these up, I wouldn't typically do this, to be honest with you. A lot of times I just like to keep it in one bass, but in this case, to really get the low end right, I needed to have just this pluck and then this sub. So the pluck is a pretty simple FM patch. If you're familiar with like deep house, this one's used quite a bit. It's just a simple variation of like that really popular sound. So essentially all I did was I used the default algorithm on operator, excuse me. I messed with oscillator 1 and turned the sustain down and gave it a little bit of release. And then I turned up oscillator 2 just that much and then gave it some decay and turned the sustain down, and I pitched it up 1 octave, I guess, just one more setting on the course. And that's what gives it that sound. And after that I just put on this pitch envelope because I wanted it to be, like I was saying, like a pluck. And if you hear, it's kind of not very, it's kind of subdued, but it just adds a little bit more of like a punch. And if you put on the pitch envelope by default, it's usually going to sound like this. The key is you just turn down the decay until it's like short. That's how you get that like quick clickiness to it. So after that I put on this EQ because there was a lot going on in like this range that I wanted to get rid of. So I just got rid of that, and you'll see more when I put on the saturator, because after that I put on the a bit warmer, of course, again, just to sort of make it a little bit thicker and a little bit more harmonic content going on. I also put on this EQ, just cutting out the low end to make room for the sub, and then I have it sidechained. Now for the sub, it's like really straightforward. It's just I actually just duplicated that patch and then turned off oscillator 2 or operator 2. So it's the same decay and sustain and all that stuff in the same pitch envelope. So they sound like they're very similar, and that's important. You want these to sort of match up as far as like the sustain and decay goes and stuff like that. It really makes them sound more like one bass, and it makes it, I don't want to say harder to tell the difference, but it makes it more like together. And then I just have a bit warmer on there to make it, to sort of glue it with this a little bit better and add some high harmonics. And then I have it sidechained. Now for the drums, for the kick I'll start off with, it's 2 layers. I have a high kick and a low kick. And the high kick sounds like this. And it's just like a what's it called? I think it's like a Lindrum kick. That is, I just filtered out the low end, and then the high end was a little bit strong, so I turned that down as well. And then the low kick is just like, I'll show you. It's just like a pretty straightforward, like kind of like, I would describe it as like a gummy type of kick sound. I don't know. Just it had a lot of low end, and it gelled well with the bass. So I cut out all the highs, and when you put these two together, then they make one kick. You just have to get the balance right between them. You can see the high kick is turned down a lot more than the low kick. And yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not really too much to that. You can really just make your own kicks that way. And yeah, it's a really good method to use. After that, I just have the hi-hat and the snare. And there's really not too much to those. There's just a couple of samples. Just like a 909 hi-hat and like this little kind of like clappy snare thing. The real key here though is, I think, just being good at sample choice and being good at getting the level of your drums right is, I think, what is important to take away from that. Now for the vocals, which are very important to this style of music, you can hear I have 2 things going on here. This first one and then the second one. And similar to what I was saying about the pad, you can hear they all sort of work together on the groove, and they play like, they're not just, this isn't just one long, like I didn't just copy this over a bunch of times. I strategically placed these on the grid to work with the groove of everything else that's going on. And I think that's very important, and that's a big cornerstone of this style of music, is like, there's a lot of really cool melodic stuff going on, but also, like I said, the groove is very important. You can hear, so it makes you, when it hits that upbeat, it makes you go like, I don't know, it's weird, but there's not really too much to them. Another thing I want to touch on is they're sort of like call and response, so it goes like, so it's like don't, And that works really well because these are samples from 2 different places, but I made them sound like they're sort of in there. I mean, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm so great, but I'm saying like use these together in a way where they sound like they're made to be together. And as far as processing goes, I just put a simple reverb on both of them, and I have them side chained. This one is I pitched it down. So originally it was like I pitched it down. It seemed to make more sense that way melodically. And these really help to add a lot of melodic content over top, because really just this it's cool, but it's kind of boring. It doesn't really have a lot going on melodically. So these vocals sort of catch your ear and work with that to just add a little bit of sauce on top, I guess. As far as vocal sample sources go, let me see if I can find where the original.
Let me go.
Yeah.
Let me go.
So I took the go on the end of that and pitched it down. As far as this goes, I think I used. Yeah, from like some deep house pack. But that's something also is like people are always asking like, oh, where do you find your vocal samples from? Where do you do this? There's really not any set place, and you can use a lot of different things. I use sample pack stuff here because this is YouTube and I don't want to get taken down for copyright. But you can, go through, everyone always says go through like 90s R&B acapellas. If you can sing on your own, that's great too. Like if you can sing these 2 little things and do it on your own, that's even better. Obviously that's what Zhu does and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, there's really no it sucks to say, but there's really no definitive source for vocal samples. You just sort of have to get out there and start doing it. And that's really as much as I can say. But yeah, so that's pretty much how I made this whole project file. And I think it's pretty solid. By no means is this like the definitive Zhu tutorial or anything, but hopefully you learned something. So thank you very much for watching. I hope everyone has a great day. Check out my new remix. It's in the description. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody.